storm has taken Tusilatok by surprise, and the seagull teaches him a magic song so he'll be able to manage in rough weather in the future. After that time, he was without equal at kayaking. He was so keen that he became hard of hearing in the end. Tusilatok's wife kills herself because one night he reproached her that their son was disturbing him with his crying. Out of longing for his dead wife, Tusilatok visits her in her grave. He is treated to both dried reindeer meat and tallow. Once she gave him a drink from a shell that gives him magic power. Dear friend, these are just some drawings I made. I am sending them to you so you can see them. It's my birthday tomorrow, and I'm going to spend my last bit of money. With some of it, please send me 2 sheets of thick paper and 1 sheet of thin paper, because I've run out of it. I remember with gratitude your kindness when you helped me sail my kayak. As for me, things are easier than last winter, even if I still can't sit upright. I have no further infirmities, apart from the fact that my head feels a bit heavy, so I think I'm recovering my strength. Kangeq, the 8th of April, 1858. Goodbye to all of you. That is what I wrote. Aron. Although it is 125 years ago that Aron related his narrative about Tusilatok, he is not forgotten. The Association of Former Kangeq Residents is named after their heathen shaman. Once a year, the association visits their old settlement on the island of Kangeq. From here, they sail, accompanied by the traditional firing of farewell salutes, to the Isle of Hope to celebrate the arrival of the first missionary to Greenland in 1721. Aron was born on the island of Kangeq, a little scary, 2 hours by kayak from Nuuk. He lived in his parents' house together with his wife Persida and their little son Apollo, and his brothers and sisters with their families. In the Moravian Missionaries' Parish Register, we find Aron's testimonial on his death. Aron was a married communion brother, a school teacher and assistant at the Kangeq village hall for many years. Furthermore, he was a successful seal hunter and skillful wood and stone carver. He was often taken ill and passed away peacefully in the 47th year of his life. The parish register only mentions Aron as a wood and stone carver, but during the last 10 years of his life, confined to his plank bed with this view from the window, Aron created a monument to Eskimo culture by painting more than 300 watercolors, each of them accompanied by a story and comments. The people Aron describes lived in close contact with nature, a nature that was hard and cruel. One had to live with it because one could not fight it. That is the reason it was attributed a life of its own, full of all kinds of ghosts and spirits whose existence explained the inexplicable occurrences of life and death. Magic songs, witchcraft, and black magic formed a natural part of the Eskimo world. There was nothing to prevent one from opening a stone by magic and hiding in it from one's enemies. Aron comments on this watercolor. A monster that tickles people to death is killing the kayaker asleep near the beach. It was not uncommon that the animals could come to one's help. The bird, a great northern diver, asks, "What are you doing here where I have my children and my dear ones?" "I just want a remedy for the itch my children are suffering from," answers the man. You can see that the bird is handing the man a trout. Others were not so calm when animals started talking. When the stranger entered the house, the dog that had learned to talk said, "My, there is Napinkuyok," at which the latter got so scared that he dropped dead. The beach spirits lived under the ground at the edge of the beach. Although they treated people to fish from the sea and tasty whaleskin in plenty, it was dangerous to visit them. They cut Ulayok's nose off to make him into a real beach spirit, like the other subterranean spirits who all have no noses. When Ulayok, who had almost become a real beach spirit, was taken home, one of his protectors said, "Hurry up and turn around, for your nose is flying back to you." The shamans had special magic powers and were therefore considered the spiritual leaders of the Eskimos. They had supernatural powers. This is Kulange experimenting with the excrement of his daughter-in-law, which he is sprinkling with the content of a bladder taken from a dead body. In a competition between two shamans, one of them turned himself into a reindeer while the other placidly watched him. Then he threw his spear against a rock and blood spurted from it. This was the world of the Greenlandic Eskimos. It was full of spirits and witchcraft. In the winter, the residents of Kangeq lived by fishing and sealing in the troubled waters off their settlement. But in the summer, Aron's settlement and the foggy and tuberculous climate of Kangeq was left behind. They all set out in kayaks and women's boats for sunny Gotthardfjord. The sun put forth its healing rays and caused the ice to break up. For several months, they were to live by hunting the roaming reindeer flocks. The party arrived at the waterfall Ilulialik after having paddled for 2 days in their kayaks and women's boats. From afar, it did not look very impressive, but when they came closer, it proved to be the first serious obstacle they had to pass before they could enter the promised land of reindeer, birds, and berries. In a few days, the water would reach Kangeq and anonymously flow past the plank bed where Aron lay alone with his brush and his watercolor paints. The subjects Aron chose were not taken from the beautiful scenery he once saw up here. What he painted was the obstacle the waterfall represented for them. They carry the boats across land to avoid the waterfall. Then they row on into the interior along streams and lakes. Then they pitch their tents in a camp. This place is called Angujatovik, and it lies at the mouth of Sønderstrømfjord. Autumn has come, smoke is ascending from the pots, and people are coming down from the hills. Around the women's boats and the tents, there is a busy life of chatter, flensing, and play. This is the innermost part of the land, high up near the ice cap, which prevents one from going any further. The hunters only take their kayaks. When they reach water, the women who have come with the party to carry the bag must sit on the kayaks. The place described by Aron is Tassasiaq, lying deep in the interior around Sønderstrømfjord. Today, 125 years later, the film team has gone to Tassasiaq to try and find traces of the reindeer hunters. We know they went this way up the stream. The women walked along the banks, whereas the men paddled their kayaks. By comparing Aron's watercolor with the landscape, we found the place where the women were transported sitting behind on the kayaks. From the hill opposite the crossing place, we noticed a large boulder. A closer inspection showed that it had been used by the hunters as their base camp. This circle of boulders was used to secure a sealskin tent. Others just lay down to sleep under an overhanging rock. In order to lie more comfortably, they made a kind of mattress of flat stones. Once they sat here and enjoyed a delicious haunch of reindeer dangling their legs over the side of the flat rock. When they had finished their meal and split the bones to enjoy the marrow as dessert, they threw them down to join the litter from other hunters' abundant meals. Small stone graves remind us of people who died during the reindeer hunt. One of these stone graves contains the body of the woman who was buried alive by her father-in-law, a drama that took place on this very spot, as we can see from the watercolor which Aron painted 10 years after his last visit. When the old man at Tasershak has lost his son, he gets angry with the son's wife and kills her with his spear after he has buried her alive by his side. She, who was supposed to have been killed, escapes and crawls on her hands and knees in search of people. By way of a postscript, Aron added to the story we know that he'd seen the grave himself and that there are tracks of her crawling along. The woman's route is several hundred kilometers long. At first over the mountain top on all fours, and then over the plain. We followed the route she must have crawled. When she got as far as Igalungmut, she trapped a little robin. And when she had eaten it, she again could use her legs thanks to witchcraft. From here she went and visited her father-in-law, who had left the fjord to see some relatives. In his narrative, Aron writes, "The moment he had told his relatives that his son and daughter-in-law had died in an accident and that he was mourning for the deceased, she arrived." Possibly because he was crushed down by illness himself, Aron continued with his description of the women's situation. The only sister of numerous brothers, in fact their only female domestic help, whom they wouldn't give up voluntarily to suitors, she escaped in secret to the mountains, and here you see her with the husband she made do with instead. The women in Eskimo society had to be strong to survive, just like Uyuk's daughters, whom we see playing ball with a boulder. The division of labor in Eskimo society was that the men went hunting and the women took care of the flensing. If the man was a good hunter, he needed several wives, and he took them even if they were unwilling. When Urunilik desired his married stepdaughter for his wife, he takes her home on his kayak after having separated her from her husband. If only one could have given him a going over with this knife and tasted one of his fat cheeks. Chiviok murders his wife in jealousy, while the lover sneaks away in a hurry. Superiority of strength was especially important in times of hunger. During the hard winter, Kangeq makes a club. He kills and eats his housemates, also his wife, and relates they have died of starvation. Other women left their husbands, like this woman who realized that her husband had gone mad with hunger and wanted to eat her. To save herself, she took flight over the ice which began to crack, but she reached the shore that same night. As dawn was breaking, she caught a grouse, but when she was about to eat it, she saw a bear by her side. In her fright, she gave the grouse to the bear, although she and her child were starving. Facing starvation and the risk of being eaten, it was natural to create legends about women who had plenty to eat. Two women who were left in a big house without anyone to support them learned how to conjure up food from the sea, so they always had plenty of seals, porpoises, and white whales. For Aron, the watercolors of women who had plenty to eat represented a beautiful dream. For at the same time he was painting them, hunger and illness claimed a heavy toll on his family. Aron's father, Christian Hendrik, died, and also Aron's little son, Apollo, succumbed. Aron himself was ill on his plank bed and not able to get food. In a letter, he writes, "One should be thankful that the people in the settlement catch seals. They still give us some from time to time." Standing by his house and looking at the fjord, we can watch the same skerry that inspired Aron to illustrate the legend of Kangeq. It so happened that all the men from Kangeq had perished in a terrible storm. Only Kangeq had survived. As he had to take care single-handedly of all the women, it one day became too much for him. Kangeq gets rid of some of the women by leaving them behind on the skerry off the shore from Kangeq while the water rises and flows over their heads. The Tusilatok Association from Kangeq have come to the Isle of Hope, where Hans Egede and his wife Gertrud Rask went ashore in 1721 to convert the Eskimos to Christianity. At this spot, where the children are playing football, Hans Egede had his dining room, until 7 years later he considers the climate too unhealthy and moves to Godthaab, where he set the convicts he had brought from Copenhagen to work building a church which is today more or less as it was then. Shortly after, he sent his people to Kangeq to fetch the timber of the old house he had left there. But the people of Kangeq had used the timber and were now anxiously awaiting Hans Egede's men. When Unusuak saw Hans Egede's longboat approaching Kangeq, he at once started to recite magic formulas with his hood pushed back behind his ears. Unusuak used his magic on Hans Egede's men and caused their noses to bleed when they landed on Kangeq to subdue its people. So they returned to the place they came from after only one night. But one of Hans Egede's men was left among the heathens and was so badly knocked about that in the end he bleeds. If one is to believe Aron's watercolors, the Greenlanders were not exactly keen on giving up their nature worship in favor of Christianity. While the missionaries were sleeping in their tents at night, the Greenlanders attacked them, some of them armed with knives. But when the missionaries were awakened by the noise, they advanced upon them armed with loaded guns. Undaunted, the missionaries nevertheless continued their efforts. Some Eskimos were baptized, whereas others acted according to the convictions and tried to keep the number of the baptized down. Mitlisach had murdered a Christian, but the Christians didn't like such things, and therefore they punished Mitlisach by surrounding him and keeping him frightened by overturning his kayak time and time again. Another man who did not like the Christians was Papak. Not only was he something of a rowdy, but he was also a good shot. Once Papak was shooting seals from the shore. All of a sudden, a whole multitude appeared, and right away he killed 5 of them with one shot. But Papak not only hunted seals. Here he has just shot Christian Frederick and is tying him to his kayak to better be able to commit his body to the deep. Hans Egede considered the Greenlandic shamans his most important adversaries since they were the spiritual leaders of the Greenlanders. According to the story accompanying this watercolor, Hans Egede indirectly asked two Eskimos to kill a shaman. When they had killed him, he punished them by having them put in irons and whipped. Hans Egede is admonishing a shaman. Both the shaman and his wife seem to be taking the matter much to heart. Slowly, the missionaries began to win souls for Christianity. But in order to convert the Eskimos, Hans Egede had to pretend himself to have magic power. Rubbing the blind man's eyes with an ointment, the Greenlanders' first pastor, Hans Egede, said that he should believe that Jesus Christ was the only one who could make the blind see again. Later, the Greenlander went to the pastor and said that now he had become a believer. Aron's most beautiful illustration of the Eskimos' inner struggle between nature worship and Christianity is perhaps this watercolor. Tusilatok, together with a seal he has recently caught, is being lifted up in the air by two seagulls who unexpectedly acquire white dresses and angel wings before his very eyes. But as soon as he rubs himself with seal blood as an antidote, he begins to descend again. Although Tusilatok was never really converted, it appears from the parish register that he was baptized in 1756. Here, he is sending one of his son's wives away because the German missionaries are coming to visit them. They did not like polygamy. When Greenlanders were converted, they often explained that they had been let down by their own guardian spirits. Imanek's guardian spirit, the merman, splits both him and his kayak lengthwise. After the merman had cut Imanek to pieces, the latter brought himself back to life with special powers he had. Then he took his kayak skin, sat down on his kayak, and put the hunting float over his head. He arrives alive at Tinotikisak, and the inhabitants immediately take care of him. Imanek, half dead, half alive, receives heavenly revelations and talks about the Christians. Although there still was solid ice about, Imanek sent 4 men in kayaks to Godhope to inform the missionaries that he had been converted and wanted to be baptized. During the next 100 years, the Danish and the German Moravian missions gradually extended their domains. They built churches in small, now deserted settlements deep inside Godthaab Fjord. Trade followed in the wake of the missionaries. Little by little, Greenlanders began to settle around the Danish colony, attracted by the commercial activities which gave them an opportunity to barter with their skins and blubber for coffee and tobacco. The new European goods were too tempting for many kayakers. Here they have boarded an abandoned ship, Aron writes. They regale themselves, taking whatever they please, but one of them plays the fool and breaks open barrels of gunpowder, sugar and other things and spreads them on the floor, which serves no useful purpose. Here, Itariksuk is trying to get something from the grocer who has come to the place to barter with the natives. Lars, won't you give me some bread and tobacco, he says to the grocer, and takes his fur coat up over his stomach to make room for the goods. It was hard for the Eskimos to understand that the Europeans did not want to give things away, even if they had plenty of everything. Tusilatok's son is killing the big dog Hans Egede kept to frighten the natives that used to steal things from him. He squeezes its throat until it dies. But not all the Greenlanders saw Hans Egede's dog as a threat. Papak, who did not only use his gun to kill Christians, was a well-known supplier of blubber, so the grocer invited him and his brother to strike a bargain. After Papak and his younger brother had bartered with their blubber for all kinds of goods, they decorated their house all over and invited the grocer to have supper with them in the foreign manner. Also, on another level, Europeans and Eskimos began to associate. Aron remarks laconically, "The woman, Aron of Kangeq, has been invited by the captain, and here you see how they prepare for dinner." In one of his last watercolors, Aron used the European hat in a satirical way to express the cultural clash between the European and the Eskimo way of life. While the others were flensing, Kangeq had to relieve himself. While he sat there squatting, his rectum came out, and he couldn't get it in again. Eventually, he had to cut it off with a knife. In January 1869, Aron was so weak that he was not able to paint any more pictures. His last lines were, "On account of my weakness, I must cut my letter short. What will our fate be in the future? I must finish my letter because of exhaustion. What will happen to us now?"